And the word savikalpa means with vikalpa, with imagination, with thought. In other words, the intellect is still present and operating. In nirvikalpa, the word says without imagination, without thought. At this point, the intellect itself has been absorbed into the ocean of consciousness. The entire mind, the awareness of any gross dynamic of material existence, quality of light, quality of energy, qualities of the presence and power of God, there is simply no separation. All separate identity has been absorbed, and there is no subject-object left. This is a condition of enlightenment, of realization. It is as one has to simply, the drop has been absorbed in the ocean. It's like you go down to the ocean, you pour a drop in the ocean, and it disappears. You go, where's the drop? The drop is the ocean. The ocean is the drop. This is nirvikalpa. It is an ecstatic state. But it produces, it is a kind of final condition of one kind, but not another. In that, if one stays in the nirvikalpa state, you lose all contact with the world. The body is present and existing in the world, but there is no consciousness operating, no intellect, no cognition. There's lots of consciousness, but no cognition. And this produces a kind of line in the sand. If the yogi stays in the nirvikalpa for too long, they'll simply merge into the ocean and go into what is a state of nirvana. In other words, they'll become completely absorbed in the ocean. The body will fall away like a leaf. And the yogi will merge in totality with consciousness. Either that, or the yogi's consciousness will re-enter egocentric identity. In other words, having been in the nirvikalpa state, actively re-enter the relative universe, and in this condition, in this state, speaking of the relative states of body, speech, and mind, the physical body, the subtle physical body, and the mental body. And when this occurs, it brings on the opportunity for what would be the fifth state of samadhi, which is sahaj samadhi, where the yogi's consciousness is merged with the ocean, and at the same time it is present and animate inside the relative bodies of physical, subtle, physical, causal, and supracausal. In other words, they can operate inside the waking dream, deep sleep, dream with sleep with the sleep with dream state, and at the same time be present when in the Nirvikalpa consciousness. This is what the meaning of the word sahaj actually is. The word translates as twin. In other words, you're conscious in two spheres of universal consciousness and relative consciousness. And when the yogi moves into the sahaj, they start to oscillate between the two states, where their consciousness is more predominantly nirvi or nirvana dominant, and at other times their consciousness is more physically or relatively dominant. In other words, in the sphere of the senses, body, speech, and mind, the subtle body and subtle physical body. As this occurs, it's a kind of rebirth where one is consciously maintaining attention inside the relative world. But at the same time, their consciousness is completely merged with the ocean of consciousness. And so it is a condition of ultimate equilibrium. There's a couple of tricks to it. Going from a state of complete merging with consciousness into the reanimation of all of the dynamics of all the states of relative consciousness or relative equilibrium. And so, as total consciousness merges into the mind, merges into the subtle body, the yogi learns to use the architecture of the relative states of the mind. Remember that the causal body is in the region of the heart. It looks like the last digit of a thumb, kind of like the opening of a cave, flat on the bottom and round on the top. It's causal. And then all of the dynamics of the subtle physical body. Primarily Sushumna, the ladder of Ida Pingala and Sushumna, the 100 fibers that move out from the wheels, the 6 wheels and the 7th chakra of the 1,000 fibers at Sahasrara. The yogi learns to pour the ocean of consciousness back into the vessel and use a magnetic cohesion between the ocean of consciousness, the causal body and body of mental formation, and all of the elements of the subtle body, primarily being the Sushumna, Ida and Pingala, 100 fibers, the 6 chakras, the Sahasrara, all of the drops and nadis. The ocean of consciousness pours down into the vessel through the Sahasrara. And you learn to mesh that consciousness with all of these varying fibers, all these varying qualities. The longer you can hold on to your body, the more intensely saturated with the ocean of consciousness your 3 relative bodies will be. This is why you'll oftentimes see, as yogis become more advanced, and you see these stages of increasingly advancing equilibrium, and you meet them at one stage, then you meet them again in 5 years, then you meet them again 10 years later, and you meet them again in 20 years. The presence of the ocean of consciousness that is unflagging and constant. So oftentimes when you meet a yogi that has been going into samadhi for decades, they transform from being yogis into being masters. They're masters of consciousness because they've completely fulfilled the task of advancing their equilibrium up through the stages of cognition, up from basic to real to essential, and achieving ultracognition, going through all of the stages of ultracognition, of samadhi, laya, savikalpa, asampranyata, nirvikalpa, and finally sahaj. And that consciousness is pouring through, and the yogi spends their time interfacing that quality of the ocean of consciousness with the architecture of their being, of their form, and they are transformed into beings of light. They become masters of consciousness. This is what the term masters of consciousness means, is that all of these stage by stage, step by step processes have been successfully achieved and completed